Hello there, faithful listener. You've tuned in to Season 7 of the Bible Explained podcast. So make sure to grab your cup of coffee, because today we are going to be discussing the book of 2 Samuel. Hello, faithful listeners. My name is Jen. I am the host of this podcast, and I'm so excited that you're here with me this morning as we read 2 Samuel 22, and we are going to be discussing the second half of this psalm that is randomly in 2 Samuel. So we'll talk about that. Make sure to grab your cup of 7 Weeks coffee, the coffee brand that supports life in the womb, and also just a delicious coffee brand. They support life, and they also make great coffee. So what's not to like? Make sure to check them out. You'll find my link for that listed in the description of this episode. 10% of your purchase will go to pregnancy centers across the U.S., and 10% will also benefit P40 Ministries when you use the link listed in the description. Get yourself a great cup of coffee today. And let's read 2 Samuel 22. 26 through 51. We'll finish out this chapter today. I'll be reading from the WEB, but make sure to grab the version of the Bible that you prefer this morning. With the merciful, you will show yourself merciful. With the perfect man, you will show yourself perfect. With the pure, you will show yourself pure. With the crooked, you will show yourself shrewd. You will save the afflicted people, but your eyes are on the arrogant, that you may bring them down. For you are my lamp, Yahweh. Yahweh will light up my darkness. For by you I run against a troop. By my God I leap over a wall. As for God, his way is perfect. Yahweh's word is tested. He is a shield to all those who take refuge in him. For who is God besides Yahweh? Who is a rock besides our God? God is my strong fortress. He makes my way perfect. He makes his feet like hinds' feet and sets me on my high places. He teaches my hands to war, so that my arms bend a bow of bronze. You also have given me the shield of your salvation. Your gentleness has made me great. You have enlarged my steps under me. My feet have not slipped. I have pursued my enemies and destroyed them. I didn't turn again until they were consumed. I have consumed them and struck them through so that they can't arise. Yes, they have fallen under my feet. For you have armed me with the strength for battle. You have subdued under me those who rose up against me. You have also made my enemies turn their backs to me, that I might cut off those who hate me. They looked, but there was no one to save, even to Yahweh, but he didn't answer them. Then I beat them as small as the dust of the earth. I crushed them as the mire of the streets, and spread them abroad. You also have delivered me from the strivings of my people. You have kept me to be the head of the nations. A people whom I have not known will serve me. The foreigners will submit themselves to me. As soon as they hear of me, they will obey me. The foreigners will fade away and will come trembling out of their close places. Yahweh lives. Blessed be my rock. Exalted be God, the rock of my salvation. Even the God who executes vengeance for me, who brings down peoples under me, who brings me away from my enemies. Yes, you lift me up above those who rise up against me. You deliver me from the violent man. Therefore, I will give thanks to you, Yahweh, among the nations, and will sing praises to your name. He gives great deliverance to his king, and shows loving kindness to his anointed, to David, and to his offspring forevermore. We talked about the first half of this psalm on Monday, so I recommend going back and listening to that. But even reading through the second half of it, I maintain that this is one of David's most beautiful psalms. I love this psalm. So verse 26 says, with the merciful, you will show yourself merciful. With the perfect man, you will show yourself perfect. Now, like I mentioned on Monday, the word perfect here could better be translated as blameless. In fact, most translations of the Bible do translate it as blameless. And blameless is different than perfect. Perfect gives off the idea that you are flawless. But blameless means something very different. Blameless means that you are innocent of something. Doesn't necessarily mean that you are flawless, but it means that you are innocent. So personally, I prefer how other versions of the Bible translate that, and not necessarily how the WEB translates it here. But I guess one thing I do like about the way the WEB translates it is the fact that they call God perfect, which is actually true. God is 100% without flaw. So God truly is perfect. and we are not. But we can become blameless. We can become innocent when we choose to have faith in God. And God actually makes us innocent when that happens. So with the perfect man, you will show yourself perfect, or with the blameless man, you will show yourself blameless or perfect. With the pure, you will show yourself pure. With the crooked, you will show yourself shrewd. So the idea here is that when somebody is going down the wrong path, when somebody is purposefully doing wicked or evil things without any care of God, God will outsmart that person. Even if these people think they are so smart, they are going to get away with everything that they want to do. They think that God is not watching them. God is going to show himself shrewd, meaning he is going to make himself known to those people. He is going to outsmart them. You will save the afflicted people, but your eyes are on the arrogant, that you may bring them down. There's not a specific Bible verse saying this, but pride really is the source of most sins. I would say most, if not all sins, actually. Comes back down to the root of pride. We have a hard time looking past ourselves, and we sin because we want something. We want to fulfill some sort of desire within ourselves. But there's a proverb that says that pride goes before destruction. So somebody who is too prideful, too arrogant, is going to end up on a destructive path for themselves, is what that proverb was getting at. And that's kind of what David is getting at here as well. He says, your eyes are on the arrogant, that you may bring them down. So God knocks them down a few pegs and helps them remove that arrogance and humbles people all the time. Because ultimately, it is better to be humble than it is to be arrogant, because humility causes us to look outside of ourselves and causes us to do more good for other people than if we're constantly just focusing on the self. It turns out actually that people are a lot more miserable when they are self-focused. In fact, just to back that claim up, I did a quick Google search about the parallels between self-centeredness and also misery or depression. And I found a whole bunch of studies. And here's a recent study from the University of California about selflessness, depression, and neuroticism. And in the little brief summary of this very long and wordy study, it says right here, person-centered analyses were used to identify 5 profiles of self-structure. 1, selfless. 2, selfless materialist. 3, interdependent insider. 4, self-centered non-materialist. And 5, self-centered. As hypothesized, the selfless cluster was associated with low levels of depressive symptoms and neuroticism, whereas the self-centered cluster was associated with high levels of depressive symptoms and neuroticism. That is just one study, and then I found another study here that is from Psych Tests, I guess. It says, self-centered people are unhappy people. New study digs into the personality of egotists. And they give a whole bunch of little facts here. It says that self-servers are more likely to believe that you should only help somebody if it benefits you in some way. It's better not to show any weakness. And in order to get ahead, you have to step on a few toes. Self-servers tend to have an underdeveloped social skills and a hard time dealing with people. 53% of self-servers feel awkward showing affection or expressing appreciation. 51% are uncomfortable in situations where they have to console someone. 42% refuse to accept opinions that are different from their own. It also says self-servers are more likely to have difficulty managing their emotions. 61% of self-servers have a habit of trying to ignore or suppress negative feelings. 55% have problems controlling their temper. Self-servers generally don't like themselves or their lives very much, which is really interesting because if somebody is self-serving, they are prideful. They are doing these things because they love themselves. But yet it turns out that thinking more about yourself actually makes you dislike yourself a lot more. Here's what it says. 49% have low self-esteem and frequently criticize themselves, and 51% of them view their lives as being one problem after another. And that's just a few of the statistics that I found in this particular study. And then there's one other study that I found that was the most popular of all of these studies, which is called Misery is Not Miserly. This was originally written, I believe, in 2014, and this is on the National Library of Medicine. And it turns out that people who are self-focused tend to be sadder, and that sadness actually makes them spend a lot more. So they have trouble holding on to the money that they receive and that they earn. So that's just a few studies there that talk about pride and arrogance being something that should be avoided. And obviously God knows that pride and arrogance is not good for us. Ultimately, we are not supposed to self-serve. We were created to worship. We were created to worship God. And God ultimately knows that. So he is going to knock us down a few pegs when we become arrogant like that, because ultimately God cares for us and he loves us and he wants us to be on the right path. And plus he wants our attention. God is always trying to get our attention. And actually David kind of goes into that, how God loves us and he wants to be there for us. Verse 29, for you are my lamp, Yahweh. Yahweh will light up my darkness. For by you I run against a troop. By my God, I leap over a wall. Once again, David was a warrior. This imagery of him going out to battle and succeeding in battle is going to be very meaningful for him. So he says that because God was right next to his side, was standing beside him, he could actually go up against an entire troop of enemy soldiers. Like David all by himself could succeed against an entire troop. And not only that, God would help him leap over the walls. So if an enemy was in a city that was fortified by a big wall, David would be able to leap over it with God's help. I've been reading the Chronicles of Narnia recently in my spare time. In The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, there's actually imagery of Aslan the lion leaping over this huge wall in order to save all of the people that were behind that wall. It kind of reminds me of this right here. David is not talking literally here. He is talking figuratively. He is being very poetic, but he's basically saying that nothing can stand in his way if God is helping him. Not a fortified city, not a whole troop of enemy soldiers. Nothing can stand in David's way because God is helping. As for God, his way is perfect. Yahweh's word is tested. So the scriptures have been tested over all of these years. Since the infancy of the Old Testament scriptures, they have been tested by people. And it turns out that the way that God wants us to live is the best possible way. I just talked about how arrogance and pride is not good for us. And yet the world is always telling us, oh, we need to have more pride. You need to be prideful in who you are. You need to accept yourself just the way you are. And the whole self-love and self-help movement is very popular right now. And even the self-worship movement is becoming very popular right now as well. So the world tells us it is good to be selfish. It is good to be prideful. But God's ways are tested. They have been tested throughout all of history. And it turns out that his ways are actually best. That is why when these shocking, quote unquote, shocking new studies come out where it actually shows that, pride really isn't that good for us, Christians aren't shocked by that study because God said that already thousands and thousands of years ago. So we're never shocked whenever these shocking new revelations are made that just confirm Yahweh's words. He is a shield to all of those who take refuge in him. For who is God besides Yahweh? Who is a rock besides our God? In other words, there is no other God on earth. There is no other God. God is the only God. Now, people can make little g gods and pretend like they are real and bow down to them and worship them. But as Yahweh says in the prophets, those little g gods that people are worshiping, they can't see anything. They can't hear anything. They can't smell anything. They can't walk. They're just made out of stone. They're just stone. They can't do anything to help you at all. Who is God besides Yahweh? God is my strong fortress. He makes my way perfect. He makes his feet like hinds' feet and sets me on high places. I had to look up what this meant. I did not know what hinds' feet meant, but that just means a deer. So David is saying God makes his feet as sure-footed as a deer that can climb up mountains. And that's where God actually sets David, is on these high places so that David can thrive. God puts him in a place of honor up on top of these high places. He teaches my hands to war so that my arms bend a bow of bronze. There's a verse in the book of Judges. I believe it's Judges chapter 2. Let me go to that verse real quick. Actually, it's Judges 3, verse 2, 1 and 2 rather. It says, "These are the nations the Lord left to test all those Israelites who had not experienced any of the wars in Canaan. He did this only to teach warfare to the descendants of the Israelites who had not had previous battle experience." So God actually does teach people how to go to war. He teaches them how to do this because unfortunately war, due to the sin nature, is a necessary evil that nations need to learn how to do. Because when other evil nations come and try to attack them, it's important for that nation to know how to defend itself. And that is why God was teaching the Israelites way back in the book of Judges how to go to war. And David says in 2 Samuel 22 that God taught him how to go to war. God actually taught his hands how to war, it says. And he taught David how to bend a bow of bronze. And not only that, God gave David a shield of salvation. So God taught David how to go to war, and he also taught him how to defend himself and gave him something to defend himself with, a shield of salvation. Verse 36, "Your gentleness has made me great. You have enlarged my steps under me. My feet have not slipped. I have pursued my enemies and destroyed them. I didn't turn again until they were consumed. I have consumed them and struck them through so that they can't arise. Yes, they have fallen under my feet." It's funny because yesterday in the book of Romans, we read a verse very similar to this verse. Paul mentioned at the very end of the book of Romans that God was going to crush Satan under our feet, which means that God is the one doing the crushing. God is the one doing all of the work, but he's using us to do the crushing, ultimately. And that's what David is saying here. He didn't take any glory for himself, even though David was very successful in battle. He says it's actually God that had crushed all of David's enemies. But David recognizes that God used him to do that. So he says, they have fallen under my feet, but God was the one who crushed them. God was the one who consumed them. "For you have armed me with strength for the battle. You have subdued under me those who rose up against me. You have made my enemies turn their backs to me, that I might cut off those who hate me. They looked, but there was no one to save, even to Yahweh, but he didn't answer them." Now, this verse actually might sound harsh to some people, and some people might think, well, doesn't God always answer people who cry out to him? Well, actually, no, he doesn't. There are several verses in the Bible that talk about how God will not hear certain prayers. James 4 talks about this. James actually says, "You ask, but you don't receive, because what you're asking for is just for your own selfish gain, basically, and God won't always listen to those prayers." There's also a verse in the Psalms that says if somebody ignores the cries of the poor, God will not hear their prayers. There's a verse in Psalm 66, verse 18 that says, "If I regard wickedness in my heart, the Lord will not hear." So these people that are trying to destroy David in 2 Samuel 22 were actively going against God when they tried to destroy David, because David was God's anointed. David was the one who God chose. And so these people who are actively going against God's plans, suddenly when they're in trouble because David is succeeding over them, they try to cry out to Yahweh. God is not going to hear their prayers because they were never in line with God to begin with. And now the only reason they want God is because they are afraid for their own lives. And David says, God isn't going to hear those people's prayers. They were prideful and they went against God's will from the very beginning. You have also delivered me from the strivings of my people. You have kept me to be the head of the nations. A people whom I have not known will serve me. And now David talks about how God exalted him to a place of honor. The foreigners will submit themselves to me. As soon as they hear of me, they will obey me. The foreigners will fade away, and they will come trembling out of their close places. This is not David being against foreigners or anything like that, because we see actually that much of David's army and many of the people that served David actually were foreigners. So David had a lot of friends that were foreigners and a lot of foreigners in his army. This isn't about foreigners, but this is about people who refuse to worship Yahweh. These are people from other nations that do not acknowledge Yahweh as their God and worship other gods. It says, these foreigners will submit themselves to me. As soon as they hear of me, they will obey me. The foreigners will fade away. They will come trembling out of their close places. But Yahweh lives. Blessed be my rock. Exalted be God, the rock of my salvation, even the God who executes vengeance for me, who brings down peoples under me, who brings me away from my enemies. So there, David is not giving any glory to himself for any of the victories that he ever had in battle. He is giving every single glory to God for all of those victories. And once again, this is David's, basically his last psalm, most people believe. That's why this psalm is smack dab in the middle of 2 Samuel, because it's most likely David's last words, last psalm at least. And it's a picture of David's entire life as well. Yes, you lift me up above those who rise up against me. You deliver me from violent men. Therefore, I will give thanks to you, Yahweh, among the nations, and I will sing praises to your name. He gives great deliverance to his king and shows loving kindness to his anointed, to David and to his offspring forevermore. So to end this psalm, David knew that there was someone special coming. Someone special that would be related to David years down the line, because he says that God shows loving kindness to his anointed, to David and to his offspring forevermore. And we know that Jesus was related to David. And ultimately, David was looking for that salvation. He was looking for the Messiah. Yes, David knew that the Messiah was going to come. In fact, he mentions the Messiah in many of the Psalms. Jesus actually quoted one of David's Psalms up on the cross, and likely many more Psalms up on the cross, because those Psalms were actually prophecy of what was going to happen to Jesus. So David knew that someone special in his bloodline was coming. So faithful listeners, we only have one more week in the book of 2 Samuel. So next Friday, we are going to end season 7, and then after that move into season 8. And don't forget, I'm not going to be doing a Friday episode for much longer. This upcoming Friday is the second to last Friday episode that I will be doing. And I'll give you guys an announcement as to why I'm doing that, and also as an extra reminder as we get closer to next week and the end of season 7. I have a lot up my sleeve for how season 8 is going to look, so I'm very excited about that. But I just want to thank all of you who have been along for the ride this whole time. Everybody who has rated and reviewed the podcast, everybody who has supported this ministry financially and with your prayers and just the words of encouragement that you always give me. I am so thankful to all of you guys. So thank you so much for everybody who has been with me all the way through season 7, and I hope that you enjoy the way season 8 is going to look as well. All right, guys, I will see you all on Friday or tomorrow for an episode out of 1 Corinthians. It's our first day in the book of 1 Corinthians, so I hope you are looking forward to that. So I'll see you guys 6 a.m. or whenever you choose to wake up and listen. But until tomorrow, happy listening and God bless.